Ezekiel chapter 8. This has nothing to do with what we're teaching, but it's just exciting.
It's all exciting.
Yeah. Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 3. Ezekiel 8:3. And he put forth the form of a hand, and took me by a lock of the head. And the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven, and brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem. Okay, now here's where he brings him. To the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. Okay, so he's in heaven, right? He's at the gate here. He's gone in the door, and in there is something. It's a seat. The seat has a name. The seat of jealousy. Okay, that's an interesting little thing there. He says the purpose of that seat is to provoke to jealousy. This is in heaven. Furthermore, there's one in every individual as well. Look at Galatians chapter 5. Galatians 5, verse 17. Galatians 5:17. It says, for the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things you would. Okay, so there's a throne room in your heart that has a seat of jealousy. And he's already told you there's two things that get jealous. Either the flesh is going to be jealous, or the Spirit's going to be jealous. It depends on who you've put on the throne. If you put God on the throne, the flesh is jealous. If you put the flesh on the throne, God is jealous. It's a seat of jealousy that provokes to jealousy. In Colossians chapter 1, here's who's supposed to be on the throne. Colossians 1, verse 15. He's talking about Jesus. He says, who is the image of the invisible God. Jesus Christ is that image, the first begotten of every creature. In Hebrews 1:3, he says, talking about Jesus, who being the brightness of his glory, talking about Jesus is the brightness of God's glory, the express image of his person. So Jesus Christ is the spitting image, if we put it in our crude vernacular, of God. So he's supposed to be on the seat that's in your heart, and it's called a seat of jealousy. In order to get to that seat of jealousy, you have to go through a door. In order to go through the door, you've got to go to a hole. In order to get to the hole, you have to dig through a wall. All of those things are laid out here in the Bible, and we'll look at it closer. But while you're there, look over at 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 4. Here he's saying, here's what people ought to be able to look at you and see. Not your fancy clothes or your gaudy embroidery, fancy jewels in your hair. 1 Peter 3, verse 4. But let it be the hidden man of the heart. So what's on the throne, or the seat of jealousy in your heart, should be the hidden man. That man is the express image of God, Jesus Christ. He should be on the throne. Back to Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 8. Then said he unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall. Okay, so the wall is going to typify your body, your flesh. He says over in Song of Solomon that they have a sister, and he compares her body to a wall. Okay, so your flesh is compared to the wall. And I digged in the wall, and behold, a door. So just below your flesh, there's a door. And we know that through the Bible. It talks about it many places. Look down at verse 10. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping thing and abominable beast, and all the idols of the house of Israel, portrayed on the wall around about. So once you go in that door, there's a house in there. There's a room that has walls. And he says it's a gallery. And on that gallery, you portray things. Like a portrait, it's portrayed. And that's the same thing we do. When you watch a movie, you get images, pictures. What do you do with them? You go hang them on the gallery in your heart. Then later on, you'll think back about that movie, book, or whatever, and you can replay it by going to that gallery room and replaying the pictures. Look at verse 12. Then said he unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark, every man in the chamber of his imagery? That's a picture gallery. For they say, the Lord seeth us not, the Lord hath forsaken the earth. Okay, so there it all is. You got to get in the door. Well, we saw, and you know from the very beginning of your Bible, Jesus told Cain, or God told Cain when he killed Abel, in Genesis 4:7, if thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. If thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. Okay, so there's a door there. That door, you open it up, and you're going to put something on the walls. You're going to hang a picture. And when you do, you're declaring what decor whoever's sitting on the seat of jealousy likes. So, like every president that comes into the White House redecorates. Well, they decorate it according to what they like. We do the same thing. With whoever's sitting on the throne is what you're going to decorate your gallery with. So if flesh is on the throne, you're putting up images that the flesh likes in that gallery. If God's on the throne, you're putting up the images he likes in that gallery. In Revelation 3:20. Revelation 3:20, Jesus says this, Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I'll come in and sup with him and he with me. He likes to get on that seat. That's designed for him. He's a jealous God. So jealousy belongs to him. That's his name is jealousy. There's a seed of jealousy buried in your heart. And not only that, that's a picture of something that's real in the heavens. Ezekiel told us that he got to go up there and see it. In Luke chapter 12. Luke 12 verse 36. Jesus talking again. And ye yourselves, like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, there he is knocking again, they may open unto him immediately. Okay, so whenever he knocks on that door, you need to open up immediately, and you're probably going to have to do some redecorating. You're going to have to tear down the pictures that the image of flesh that was sitting on the seat of jealousy liked, and decorate it with the things that he likes, because you're going to let him sit on it. Now this is all that I've got to cover. One other thing in that verse. Doctrinally, that verse is not doctrinally for our age. He says, And ye yourselves, like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding. Okay, we are the wedding. We're the ones getting married. So he's talking to somebody else. That passage doctrinally is talking to Jews in the tribulation, waiting for Christ to come back after his marriage and take care of business. Song of Solomon 5, verse 2. Song of Solomon 5:2 says, this is a Gentile woman that is speaking here. She says, I slept, but my heart wakeneth. Okay, so that's clue one. We're talking about a heart. We're talking something inside you. My heart wakeneth. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh. Okay, he's knocking on the heart's door just like he did in Revelation chapter 3, saying, Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled, for my head is filled with dew, and the locks of my and the locks with the drops of the night, whatever all that means. I put off my coat, how shall I put it back on? I've washed my feet, shall I defile them? Verse 4, my beloved putteth his hand by the hole of the door, just like we saw in Ezekiel. He said, son of man, get up and go dig in that wall. He dug in the wall, and there was a hole. In the hole, behold, a door. Then he opens the door, and the seat of jealousy, images, a gallery. All of this is connecting right back in there. And my bowels were moved for him. Okay, so you open the door to Christ when he says, hey, I want to talk to you for a minute. That happens millions of times throughout the day. He'll draw you. He'll say, hey, I got something I want to tell you. That's just what I notice it, because Toby and I work together all the time, 24/7. And just out of nowhere, we'll have a thought that comes in that we want to tell each other. And so whatever's going on, the ambulance or whatever, it has to stop. Whatever we're doing, the machine's got to, turn down, or the radio's got to turn down, so we can tell each other what we're thinking. God's the same way. Throughout the day, he'll have something he's thinking that he wants to talk to you about. He'll be knocking at the door. When he does, open immediately. But make sure that the gallery is hung with something that he'll like, because he's going to sit down on a seat, and it's going to be the seat of jealousy. Interesting, fun stuff in that book. It has nothing to do with our lesson. All right, let's go to the lesson. We are in Esther. Chapter 4, I think. Chapter 4. Yes. Esther chapter 4, and we covered some of this, so let me find. We are verse 4. 4 verse 4. Esther 4 verse 4. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her. What are they telling her? They're telling her that there's a decree been given that all the Jews are going to be put to death. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Okay, so she's gotten the message. Mordecai's down there fasting. He's got sackcloth and ashes on, standing in front of the gate. And she said, wait a minute. That's, I grew up with this guy. Let's send him some good clothes. So she sends it down there, and he says, no, return to sender. No longer at that address. Verse 5. Then called Esther Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains. Chamberlain. I'm assuming that's a male that is waiting on these women, who he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a command to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So she said, okay, why did this package come back to me? I sent you some good stuff here. It's going to feel a lot better than sackcloth and ashes. Why did you send it back to me? So Hatak went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which is before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasurers for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake to Hatak, and gave him command unto Mordecai. This guy's getting a workout. All the king's servants and the people of the king's province do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court. Did I skip a verse? No. Okay. To come into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. So she's saying there's a law, you know the rules. Rules are I shouldn't go in there and, start whining. There's a time I'm, on the calendar set when I can come in and whine. And if I show up some other time, there's an exception. If he holds out the golden scepter, then I get to have my petition. If he holds it up, or whatever else he does with it, I get to lose my head. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Okay, so Esther doesn't have any idea of what's been going on in the town. She's been locked away in the queen's quarters. She's over here with all the chamberlains and chambermaids and all this stuff, and she's in a world of her own. She doesn't realize all of her people have been given a deadline on their life. She doesn't realize that. She finds out somehow that Mordecai ain't acting right. And so through that process, she learns what's happened. Then in verse 4, it says, "Then was the queen exceedingly grieved." Okay, so Esther loved Mordecai. That, if you think about it, she's in a foreign land. Her folks are dead. This is the person who's brought her up. She views him as a father. That's the figure that she has. He's the father figure in her life. And it says that she obeyed him all of her life, just like he was her father. And now, this guy's in sackcloth and ashes. Okay, well, something's changed here. He's the one that got me into this position. You know, I'm that second in command of the nation. And now he's worried. So what's the door? I'm missing some information here. So she calls in, of course, the chamberlain, Hatak. Hatak goes out there and runs back and forth and gets these messages. Haman, in chapter 2, verse 11, he used to go before the court of the women's house. So he could walk there and probably get messages back and forth to Esther. But here he's not allowed because he's in sackcloth and ashes. They wouldn't allow him there. It's like, well, not anymore. Used to, in East Hill, there could be no beggars. If you were going to be on the street asking for money, you had to move on. The popo would give you a trespass warrant. Now they don't care anymore, but used to. So that's what's going on here. If you're not looking like you belong, you won't belong. You'll have to get along. So she sent him these clothes and everything. He returns them. None of the other women in the court of the ladies, knew what was going on either. It wasn't until they got the message back from Mordecai that anybody that was in this segregated area here had a clue. They were in their own little utopia over there. So he says the city of Shushan was perplexed. So yes, he means that in a general term, not in a specific term. Because obviously this little section that Esther was in was not perplexed. They didn't even know. Now, once they found out, they were perplexed. Mordecai gives an order in verse 8 to Esther. He says, "Go in unto the king to make supplication unto him and to make request before him for her people." So he says, hey, I've got a command. She's used to getting commands from him. She grew up, and I'm sure she heard him say, "Hey, don't touch that thing. Back away from there. Sit down, shut up, hold on." That's good advice for a woman who's riding when the man's driving. It's sit down, hold on, and shut up. Getting quiet in here. In verse 20, chapter 2, verse 20, it says, "Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him." So now is going to be no different. He's given her another command. The command is go see the king. This has got to stop. There's something bad about to happen. And so he gives her this thing to go plead for the lives of the Jews. Now this is an obligation she had as being a Jew, to plead for the Jews. She didn't change being a Jew. She didn't lose that. She was still a Jew. So now she's got an obligation. Her Jewish people are in a bad way. It's her obligation to help them any way she can. We as Christians have the same obligation. He says, do good to all men, especially them that are of the household of faith. So we should be good humanitarians to all people. However, the first thing we do is be better to the people that are our brothers in Christ, sisters in Christ, Christians, than even to the lost, just like she has to here. But it's not just as simple as her walking in there and saying, "Hey, King, I need to talk to you for a minute. Come to my office." It doesn't work that way. The Persians had a law, and the Persians were serious about their laws. They would not be broken. Once it was in writing, that was the law. Now, fortunately, they had put in some fine print on this law. The king can override it. All he has to do is hold the scepter out. If he holds the scepter out, then we'll give you an exception. Now, this is a picture of something. It's a picture of someone entering into the presence of the king, God, into the throne room. In 1 Timothy 6, verse 16, Paul talks about this throne room. Talks about dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen nor can see. Okay, that's where God dwells. It says he's in a throne room that no man can approach to. Okay, as far as Esther's concerned, she can't come in. She's not been called. However, there is an exception. Remember Moses. Moses asked to see the glory of the Lord. And what was the reply? The reply was, "Thou canst see my face, for there shall no man see me and live." But there was a little exception there, even for Moses. 1 John chapter 1, verse 18. John 8, verse 18. John, did I say 1 John? John.
You were testing us.
Yeah, John chapter 8, chapter 1, verse 18. It says, "No man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him." Okay, so that's a fact. Nobody's seen him, because you can't get in there to see him. But there are some exceptions. The Bible always gives you full disclosure. You've got all the print right there. Some of it's fine print. You got to study and figure it out, but it's all there. In John, you're in John. Look at chapter 14. John 14, verse 9. John 14, 9. "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father." Okay, there's your way in right there. Your way in is Jesus Christ. That's the way you get to the throne room. Paul said it this way, "Let us come boldly to the throne of grace." That's a command to go see him, to obtain mercy and grace to help in time of need. So we're told, hey, you got access. You can get right on in, even though no man can. Well, there's something that puts us in a different category than just man. If you're in Christ Jesus is his Son. And his Son gets to come play in the that is his playground. He's always there. Furthermore, Jesus Christ is God's scepter. And he holds that out to us. In Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. Numbers 24, 17. Numbers 24, 17. In fact, let me see something. Numbers 24, 17. And I believe, yeah, of all the things. You know who's talking here? Balaam. Balaam gives us some of the most profound prophecy. Here it is, verse 17. "I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob." Who's that? Jesus. "And a scepter shall rise out of Israel." He's the scepter. "And shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Seth." Now that hasn't happened yet. That's going to happen. Armageddon, he's going to destroy. But he hadn't done the destroying yet, but the scepter's available. That's Jesus Christ, and we can get it. If we've got Jesus Christ, we know we're accepted in the throne room. Back to Ezra chapter 4, verse 13. Esther 4:13. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. Talk about some faith. He was just down there in sackcloth and ashes, worried and fretting. Obviously, it did him some good. He says, we're going to be delivered. Either you'll help us, or if you don't, God will send somebody to help us. We're going to be helped. So, nothing wrong with putting on a little sackcloth, a little humble pie, and it doesn't hurt you every now and then. Here it gave him some faith, it strengthened his faith. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. Okay. We like the first part of that. We don't like that part. He said right there, God can use you. If you won't let him use you, he'll destroy you. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Now that's a famous phrase throughout the Bible. All preachers have used it. Who knows if you're come for such a time as this? And anytime they want to emphasize something, they lay it on you as a commissioning. You're here for just a time like this. Okay, that's fine, but use the context of it. The context is God delivers, and he'll pick someone to use. The context also says if you've been chosen to be used and you don't submit to it, you get destroyed. He doesn't make a vessel to fulfill an object and the vessel have a hole in it and not function like he designed it and keep it. No, he breaks it into pieces. Okay, so you either be used for the mission that God sends you on, or God destroys you. Verse 15. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me. Neither eat nor drink 3 days and nights, 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Okay, Mordecai receives Esther's reply, and he reminds her that she's a Jew. You're not going to get out of this thing safe. The decree is all Jews. And he didn't say there's an exception for the queen. He just said all Jews. So don't get the high and muckety-muck just because I've gotten a position now and I've got a title that gets you out of this decree. We've all been given a decree. The wages of sin is death. The way of the transgressor is hard. Okay? We've all been given that decree. And it doesn't matter who we are, what position we hold, or what title we claim to have. That's the decree. So, she's got to do something about it. Verse 13 and 14, the purpose of God's putting her in office is made manifest. It's for a time like this. It's for this very situation. God's moving behind the scenes, orchestrating things even in the heathen country for his people. He's watching out for them when they're not even thinking about him. And that's good. Christian applications to the passage. God has placed you where you are for a specific reason and purpose. Okay, we know that. If he's let you breathe when you woke up in the morning, then that means he's got a reason for you being there. He doesn't have to give you breath. Breath is on loan from God. You find that in Daniel. Daniel chapter 6, I think it is. God gives breath for a man to be able to do something with it. And if a man won't do it, then he's on thin ice whether or not God's going to let him breathe anymore. It's his breath. If you don't do what it is God wants you to do, then the Lord sometimes will choose somebody else. Now, he's patient. That's good. He's very patient and he's very merciful. But there comes an end to it. He'll try to say, hey, look, you're perfect for this job. I know you don't see it. I'm seeing it from up here. Go do this. I'm setting you up for this position right here to go do this thing right here for today. And if we refuse, probably we'll get another chance. Probably how often we get chances is how humble we are at the end of the day when we say, man, I'm sorry I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to do that, and I'm sorry, Then he may give us another shot at it. It's up to him. A lot of times we can't judge when the next chance is going to be. He may or may not give you another chance. If you fail to perform your task, then you lose reward. Now that we already know that. We've been given things to do. God's prepared us to do it. He's promised to strengthen us for the task. He's promised to do everything. All we have to do is force this flesh, that is our enemy, to obey. And if we'll do that, then not only will we be able to fulfill what he wants us to do, but he'll reward us for it. Now, what a thing. I hate it when they try to train dogs and they give them a treat for every single thing. You know what that does? That makes a bunch of beggars out of dogs. You can't tell it to sit because it's going to sit for 2 seconds if you don't put your hand out with something in it. It's looking for a treat, not obedience. But that's the way God does us. He tells us things to do, and when we do it, we get a reward. Now, you might not see the reward right here. A lot of them you do see here. But you can count on it. The reward is going where it's going to last forever. In verse 16, Esther decides she's going to go on in. Okay? This is not the way things are supposed to be done, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's the way God does us. The thing you're supposed to do, you will not feel right about doing. When it's time to tell somebody, hey, just wanted to let you know, there's a heaven and there's a hell. And one day you're going to be face to face with whatever you've prepared for. Which one are you heading to? It's not going to feel right to say that to anybody. Never. Because this flesh don't like that. Okay, that's her. It wasn't feeling right. You're just going to have to walk in there and, well, you're going to have to come up with the same thing she did. I'm going to do it. If it kills me, that's just what it does. It kills me. If I perish, I perish. Now, once you do that, you know what you've just done? You've just told the flesh it doesn't matter. I don't care how you feel. This is what I'm doing. And that's what she does. Now, she sets things up. It's not just that, hey, we're going to take a chance here and I'm going to go in there and, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. No, it's all on the line. If it doesn't work, I die, I perish. So she set things in place. She said, I want you to do something for me. I'm going to go in there. Now, there's no word of God in this. There's nowhere are they praying to God. We can kind of read between the lines and hope and imagine that they were when they're fasting here. That's the purpose of a fast. But she says, go tell all the Jews to start fasting for me, because I'm going to go in and see what I can do. But we need some fasting going on. And furthermore, I'm going to have not just Jews, heathen join us. The other chambermaids are going to join. They're going to be fasting as well. So she set it up the correct way. Now, fasting is recommended all throughout the Bible. I usually do about a 40-day fast between meals. That's right. Fasting is mentioned. Anytime you want to get God's attention, you can be sure to get it by saying no to the flesh. Because that's not natural for humans to do. So if you'll say no to the flesh, you get his ear. That's what fasting is about. That's why we have the prayer meeting at 5:30 on Thursday morning. That's not a good time for anything but sleeping. Okay, we're telling the flesh no. No. You don't get what you want. We'll tell you what you want. Here it is in Matthew 17, verse 21. Jesus is giving them advice. The disciples have gone out. They said, hey, look, we've been trying to cast out demons. We've been having a great time, except for we had a little trouble over here. Jesus said, howbeit this kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting. You got to be praying. But then you've got to do more than just say, God, you do this. Because that's what prayer is doing. Prayer is saying, God, you go do this. But fasting is saying, I'm willing to be part of the practice. I'll put myself down. And I'll submit and be at your disposal. The early church fasted in Acts 14:23. Acts 14:23 says, and when they had ordained them elders in every church, they had prayed with fasting. They commended them to the Lord on whom they believed. Okay, so here it is. They're setting up the early church to do it. They don't just set about with what makes sense to them. They don't just search the scriptures and try to find out that way, although that's important too. Here, they fast. So we need to know for sure we've got an answer from God. So for that, we're going to demonstrate it's not a fleshly answer, but a spiritual one. 2 Corinthians 11. Here's the Apostle Paul. He says, I fast often. 2 Corinthians 11:27. In weariness, in painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger, in thirst, in fastings often, cold and nakedness. So Paul's saying, hey, it's often that I have to fast. Well, I would imagine so. He's got the whole church. That he's the one setting up the church. So he's got people from all these nations. And he's sending out letters, and as soon as he starts a church, whoever takes over just turns into false doctrine. He says, as soon as I leave, I know what's going to happen. Your own people are going to jump up and start subverting you. So he's fasting here. He's doing it to get God's attention. That gets God's attention, and God does something about it. There's some things that you need an answer to prayer for, and you won't get it unless you fast. According to the Bible, you will not get an answer until you've fasted. The disciples were doing all they could, and they said, we can't get this demon out. He says, no, sir, there's only one way. Fasting and prayer. Now, the two go together. You don't just fast for a diet. Now, there's plenty of people that do that. We've got all these health nuts in America. You know, the CrossFit. I mean, if I was that fit, I'd be cross too. CrossFit people. Their whole life is they idolize the body, and they'll fast. They'll only eat certain things in certain times and all that stuff they do. But that's not spiritual. Fasting is connecting in prayer. Then it becomes something. God doesn't really care about this body. Verse 16, she said, if I perish, I perish. That's a good attitude for a Christian. When rough things happen in life, you do all you can do. You ask God to do all you can do. In doing all you can do, you fast within reason. Now, take into account, do it healthy. Don't sit, if you've never fasted before, don't say, I'm going to have a 40-day and 40-night, no food, no water fast. Well, you'll be in heaven real quick. That fast will be extended. Yeah. Okay, so do it smart. You don't have to be stupid about it. Right. Now, it doesn't hurt. When I say fast, I don't necessarily mean you have to fast a whole day. You could fast a meal. You could fast as simple as just, I'm going to do it without breakfast. I don't wake up for that anyway, so I'm going to do it. No. You can choose a meal that you fast for. That's a good way to get into it. It starts you out slow, but don't just skip a meal and go play video games. That's not a fast. That's more time for fun. That's not what it's about. It's about prayer. It's about letting the body remind you Because it will. The second you decide to tell this body no, it says, oh, yes. Yes. Every hunger pain that shows up, that's a reminder. Get to praying. Get to praying. Pray about that thing. And that's what it's all about there. Now, in some of life's hard things, you fast. Take a time to fast. You decide between you and God how long that is, when that is, what type that is, all that stuff. I'm not going to get legalistic about it. You decide. You do all you can in there. Now, it's not a matter of the attitude is, I've done all I can do and I'm taking a chance here. Maybe this will work. No, that's not. That's the wrong mindset. The mindset here is, I've put myself in God's hands. I've done everything He's commanded. What He does is what He does. If I perish, I perish. But it's not because I've taken a chance. It's because I've put myself in God's hands. If He decides I perish, then I will. This is a theme that runs throughout the Bible. Job says it this way: though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. That's Job 13:15. That's the same sentiment, the same attitude. Joab's attitude, he says it this way: be of good courage, and let us play the men for our people and for the cities of our God, and let the Lord do that which seemeth him good. He says, we're going to do everything we need to do, and you go fight over there. If you need help, I'll come help you. If I need help, you can come help me. If both of us need help, then it's just too bad. Nobody gets any help. We'll play like we're men. And let the Lord do what the Lord decides He wants to do. That's a good attitude. That's the same one she had. If I perish, I perish. The 3 Hebrew children had the same attitude. They told Nebuchadnezzar this: we're not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. But if not, He could, or maybe He won't. If not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou set up. If we perish, we perish. But we're not doing wrong. We're in His hands. He can deliver us if He chooses to. If He doesn't, then He just chose not to. That's the attitude to have. So the same thing with life situations, especially those things you want to fast about. Those things you want to fast about, you fast and you pray, and you leave the outcome to God. You're not being a charismatic, stomping your feet, demanding God do what you tell Him to. A fast is not a way for you to dictate to God what He's going to do. It's a way for you to get on board with what He is going to do. Verse 17. Up to this point in Esther's life, she's always done what Mordecai wanted her to do. And that got her to being the queen. But now the tables have turned a bit. It says, Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now it's the woman who's given him a command, and he's obeying it. Now, there's good precedent for it here, because she's putting her life in her hands by doing what he said. So now she's asking for some support in it. And when she asks for that, he sees that she's going to do the thing he's asked. It's no big deal for him to do what she asked. And so he does. She's grown up. She's not a little girl anymore. She's taken some responsibility, and because of that, he reiterates with obeying what she wanted. The same thing is true throughout the Bible. You'll see it. The same thing is true with the husband and wife relationship. Basically, the veto vote is with the husband, biblically. However, that doesn't mean that the husband never does what the wife has to say. You're supposed to listen and find out. Now, that's a very, very difficult thing to do, because you've got to know when you're supposed to do it and when you're not supposed to do it. There's a time you're supposed to listen, and there's a time it's supposed to go in one ear and out the other. And that means you've got to have a close relationship with God and let Him tell you, okay, do what Esther said this time. Or, don't worry about it, this is the plan. In Genesis 21, verse 12, God talking to Abraham. Genesis 21:12. When Sarah's telling Abraham to get rid of Ishmael, Abraham doesn't want to do that. That's his boy. Here's what God says about it. Genesis 21:12. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. Ooh. It wasn't the advice that Abraham wanted to follow, but it was right advice. Now that shows the relationship. The relationship is this. There's not a dictator relationship. It's two deciding what's the right thing to do, and God is the final vote. Sarah said, get rid of that woman. Abraham says, oh, she's overreacting. Like women do. She's just over. He says, God, you hear that? She's gone crazy today. And he says, no, everything she just said to do, you better get on it. So then you do it. The Apostle Paul says over and over, he says, wives, submit to your own husbands as unto the Lord. It's always as unto the Lord. The Lord's always in there. Then he goes on and says it this way, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of the Lord. So it's not a matter of one person does all the submitting. It's a matter of it's going back and forth, back and forth. Furthermore, both parties have to submit to the Lord. And that's kind of pictured in our story there in Esther. All right, that's the end of Esther chapter 4. We'll pick up with chapter 5 next week.